It starts off with a bang, literally. Our main character, a bald dude, wakes up in this creepy, cube-shaped room. Think nightmare fuel. He starts checking things out, but when he steps into a different colored room, oof. He's instantly disintegrated by some invisible laser, leaving his remains scattered on the floor. And get this, you can clearly see the name Alderson on his chest. Next up, we meet Quentin. He's freaking out, hands up in the air like he's being held up, when he bumps into another guy. They both spot a room with a color that screams danger, so they slam the door shut. Just then, Holloway enters the scene. This woman looks completely lost and disoriented. Quentin instinctively moves towards her with his fist raised, but he stops himself. Understandably, she bolts. Quentin tries to calm her down, assuring her he won't hurt her, but suddenly they hear screams for help. They throw open the door and find Levin, a young woman in trouble. Quentin doesn't hesitate. He grabs her and pulls her into the room, but in the chaos, Levin's glasses get crushed. Holloway, who's more confused than a penguin in a desert, asks Quentin what the heck is going on. He tells her to hang tight, promising to explain everything. But before he can get a word out, Worth, an older man, appears from another door above. Quentin, who's probably wondering what fresh hell he's stumbled into, warns them all to be careful because there are traps everywhere. He tells them how Levin almost bit the dust in one of those deadly rooms. Levin, still shaken, clings to Quentin while Holloway approaches Worth. Alright, so Worth is looking pretty dazed after taking a nasty hit. But then there's Ren, an older gentleman who seems to have a few tricks up his sleeve. This guy starts fiddling with his shoelaces. Seems random, right? But he's actually using them to investigate the rooms. He opens a door and tosses a shoe into a blue room, and the shoe instantly bursts into flames. Turns out, these rooms have motion detectors that are not messing around. Quentin, who's kind of taking charge, asks everyone if they remember how they got there. Of course, nobody has a clue. Holloway, never one to shy away from a wild theory, blurts out that maybe aliens are behind all this. Quentin tries to keep things grounded, reminding them to focus on what they know. He asks Ren for his thoughts, and Ren basically says they can't just stand around. They need to get a move on and find a way out. Quentin agrees, giving everyone a pep talk about how if there's an entrance, there has to be an exit. But they all know it's not going to be a walk in the park. Worth and Ren are definitely aware of the danger, and to make matters worse, Ren has a creepy feeling that someone is watching them. Levin is understandably freaking out, but Quentin tries to reassure her. He reveals that he's a cop and promises to get them all out of there. Meanwhile, Ren's is still on the case. He opens another door and throws his other shoe in to make sure it's safe. No fiery explosion this time, so they all head into the room. Levin, who's got a sharp eye, notices some numbers on the door, and then Holloway drops a bombshell. She claims they only have 3 days to survive without food or water. She starts describing all the gruesome symptoms of starvation, which definitely doesn't help the already tense atmosphere. But Ren, ever the resourceful one, tells Holloway to suck on a button from her suit to keep her saliva flowing. Smart thinking. He tosses a shoe into another room, but just as Quentin's about to step in, Ren stops him. There's a chemical sensor that could fry them. Quentin is blown away. How does Ren know so much about these sensors? Ren, with a smirk, corrects Quentin's pronunciation of his name and tells him he's French. Ooh, mysterious. Turns out, Quentin is a total escape artist. He knows all the tricks for breaking out of prison. But this time, things don't go as planned. As he enters a new room, he hears a click, and some kind of substance sprays him in the face. To make matters worse, the door slams shut. Everyone watches in horror as Ren's face starts to burn. By the time Quentin manages to open the door, Ren's face is badly scorched. Everyone is completely stunned. Okay, so Quentin starts grilling everyone, trying to figure out who's who and how they ended up in this mess. We already know Quentin is a cop, and Holloway is a doctor. Levin seems like an average student, nothing out of the ordinary. Worth describes himself as a bored office worker who hates his life. Classic. Holloway is understandably pissed and starts ranting about whoever kidnapped them, stealing their jewelry and everything. Quentin then focuses on Levin's glasses. She says she needs them to read, and that's when Quentin has a light bulb moment. Why would they take Holloway's jewelry, but not Levin's glasses? He then asks Levin to use her math skills to figure out the pattern with the numbers on the doors. Levin, who's clearly no slouch in the brains department, realizes that the rooms with prime numbers are the dangerous ones. When the group is all like, "Whoa, how did you know that?" She casually drops that she memorized all the room numbers. Talk about impressive. Quentin gives Levin a well-deserved high five, and she, feeling like a total rock star, confidently enters the first room, thrilled to have cracked the code. Hours pass, night falls, and they've checked all the doors except for one that's up above. Quentin climbs up and finds it's jammed. When he finally gets it open, a guy falls out of the room. The man only manages to mumble something about the color green before he starts banging his head against the wall. Yikes. Holloway checks on the guy who fell from the room, Kazan, and thinks he might have some mental health issues. Levin, who's exhausted and probably a bit annoyed, snaps at Kazan for almost crushing her and wonders how he's even survived this long. But Quentin, ever focused on the mission, ignores the drama and keeps climbing. Then things get really weird with Kazan. He starts hallucinating, seeing things that aren't there. Levin, at her wit's end, tells the group it's obvious what's going on. Holloway, who's gone back into the room, suddenly starts choking. Chaos erupts as everyone thinks there's some kind of poisonous gas in the air. But nope, false alarm. Holloway assures them she just swallowed a button. Talk about a close call. Poor Kazan is completely out of it, and Holloway tries to calm him down. The group leaves the room, and Worth and Levin realize that the numbers on the rooms aren't actually prime numbers. They've been misinterpreting the code this whole time. Just as Quentin is about to enter the next room, Levin stops him. Good thing she did, because Quentin realizes there are wires everywhere. He manages to avoid getting crushed, but he injures his legs in the process. Levin apologizes and continues working on the numbers. Meanwhile, Kazan is having a full-blown meltdown, and Quentin, who's had enough, orders Worth to shut him up. Quentin, with his detective senses tingling, starts to get suspicious of Worth. I mean, the number system might be flawed, but how did Worth know there was a trap in that room? Quentin has this uncanny ability to read people like an open book. So, Worth goes into the room with Kazan, eyes covered, muttering about how much he hates red rooms. And wouldn't you know it, they end up trapped in a red room. Figures. Meanwhile, Levin is busy as a bee, scribbling calculations all over the wall while Quentin, who trusts no one, confronts Worth. Quentin, clearly fed up with Worth's negativity, basically tells him if he hates his life so much, why doesn't he just end it? He even opens the door and tells him to jump into the void. Quentin pushes his buttons so much that Worth finally snaps and yells that there's no way out of this place. You could hear a pin drop after that. Holloway, who's probably wondering what she's gotten herself into, approaches Worth and asks him how he can be so sure there's no escape. Quentin then starts interrogating Worth, demanding to know who he really is, but the guy stays tight-lipped. But then, out of nowhere, Worth spills the beans. He admits that he only designed the outer shell of the structure. He has no clue about the numbers or the purpose of the whole cube thing. He was just paid to design a cube, and that's it. The tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Holloway is about to lose it, and everyone is desperate to get the heck out of there. Worth tries to explain to Holloway that there's no grand conspiracy, no mastermind behind all this. They're just stuck in this cube, and that's that. He goes on to say that the cube was built to be used, otherwise what's the point? Quentin calls him out on his nonsense, and Worth replies that that's exactly the point. They're there because everything is messed up. Then Worth says he actually feels relieved. Holloway realizes he stayed behind to tell them the truth. Quentin, however, completely loses it and starts pummeling Worth. Levin and Holloway have to pull him off because, hey, Worth is the only one who knows anything about this place. Levin approaches Worth, who's now lying on the floor, and asks him about the doors. Worth tells her that whoever put them there knows. Levin asks about the size of the cube, and Worth tells her it's a massive 434 feet squared. Levin starts doing some calculations and figures out that there are about 17,576 rooms, each 26 feet high, and that the numbers are like addresses for each room within the cube. She tells the others they're only 7 rooms away from the exit. Holloway tells Quentin they need to find a way to get past the traps. Quentin says he'll figure something out, they'll take a chance, and Worth will lead the way. Holloway insists that they need to take turns, and just as they're discussing this, they come across a room below with a sound-activated trap. Levin suggests they turn back and try a different route, but Quentin insists there's no time for trial and error. Wandering around aimlessly could get them hopelessly lost. Holloway isn't convinced until Quentin reminds her they only have one shoe left for testing traps, and staying silent is their best bet. He proposes that Worth goes first, and Kazan stays behind, since he's unpredictable and could endanger everyone. Holloway objects, accusing them of being heartless. They could have left Kazan to die, but they're still human. Kazan covers his mouth as Worth slowly enters the sound-sensitive room. Everyone holds their breath, praying Worth doesn't make a peep. He moves stealthily, opens another door, and makes it to the other side. One by one, they all follow, moving in silence. Holloway stays in the room, waiting for Kazan. She guides him slowly, but just as Quentin is entering the room, Kazan touches the doorknob of the room below. The door swings open, and Kazan lets out a small cry. Luckily, Quentin reacts quickly, dodging the deadly spikes that shoot out. He grabs Kazan, who's frozen in fear. Holloway tries to stop him, and they get into a heated argument, airing all their grievances. Quentin, at his wit's end, slaps Holloway. Levin, still focused on the numbers, wonders if they're not curious about what's behind the door, because according to her calculations, this should be the last one. Worth opens the door, and it's pitch black inside. Quentin suggests they make a rope out of their clothes. Levin, always the logical one, suggests that she should go since she's the lightest, but Quentin's not having it. Holloway steps up, saying it's her turn. The group gets to work on the makeshift rope, and Holloway swings into the darkness to explore. Suddenly, the whole structure shakes, and the rope slips from their grasp. Quentin manages to grab it just in time and starts pulling Holloway back up, but then something shifts in his expression, and he lets go of the rope. Holloway falls into the abyss with a scream. Quentin returns to the room and tells everyone that she slipped. Levin is devastated and retreats to a corner, completely heartbroken. Quentin slyly approaches Levin and tries to comfort her, telling her to have faith in her abilities, that deciphering the numbers is her thing. But Levin corrects him. It's not a talent, it's her mind working overtime. Worth, observing the situation, suggests they take a nap since they've been going at it non-stop for a while. No sooner said than done, the two of them fall into a deep sleep. But then Quentin takes Levin by the hand and leads her to another room, away from the others. When she asks him with a worried look if they're going to leave the others behind, he drops a bombshell. The others are a trap, and they are the keys to the whole thing. Quentin starts talking about his plan, but then he starts touching Levin in a way that makes her extremely uncomfortable. Frightened, Levin runs out of there, and thankfully, Worth shows up and pushes Quentin away, stopping him. Wow, this is insane. Quentin is completely losing it. He starts ranting about Worth and Kazan being spies and that Holloway betrayed them. Levin realizes the horrifying truth. Quentin didn't just let go of the rope, he deliberately pushed Holloway to her death. Now, it's 3 against 1. They tell Quentin to get lost, but he snaps and attacks Worth. Levin and Kazan are trapped on the other side, unable to help. Quentin pushes Worth down the stairs, but then he's stunned to see Worth laughing hysterically. That's when they stumble upon Ren's lifeless body. Talk about a twist. They're all back in the same room they started in, as if the room is playing tricks on them. Quentin, predictably, freaks out and yells at Levin, demanding to know where the heck they are. Levin, cool as a cucumber, tells him to calm down and figure it out himself if he's so smart. She even calls him a murderer. Things are getting heated, and it seems like no one believes they'll ever escape this nightmare. But wait, Worth starts investigating and opens the door to the room where Ren was burned. And guess what? It now leads to the outside, like they're on the edge of a cliff. Worth, with a knowing look, explains that the rooms are like a giant moving puzzle, which explains all the strange noises they've been hearing. Levin, ever the brilliant mind, figures out that room 27 is like a central hub connecting everything, a giant lock of sorts. But the burning question remains, how are those deadly rays emitted? Quentin and Worth are glued to the doors, reading off the numbers, while Levin racks her brain, trying to decipher the code. She says she could identify the traps, but without a computer, it's incredibly difficult because the numbers are mind-bogglingly complex. Quentin, losing his patience, urges her to hurry up. No one wants to die in this crazy place. And then, out of the blue, Kazan, who's been eerily silent until now, blurts out the correct answer. Everyone is stunned. Levin starts testing him with other calculations, and he answers them all flawlessly. They ask him about the numbers on their current room, and Kazan nails it again. Levin, beaming, deduces that this room must be trap-free. But there's no time to celebrate because Quentin, on edge and desperate, laughs maniacally and says there's only one way to be sure if Kazan is right, and without missing a beat, he shoves Worth into the room. Quentin is completely unhinged, ordering everyone to hurry up. Worth emerges on the other side, battered and bruised but alive. Levin, terrified, slams the door in Quentin's face, cutting off his air supply. Worth quickly closes the door to prevent Quentin from following them, while Levin and Kazan frantically try to figure out if the next room is a trap or not. It's payback time. They decide Quentin needs to pay for his crimes. Just as he's about to step through the door, Worth flings it open, sending Quentin tumbling headfirst into the next room. He lands with a sickening thud, blood splattering everywhere, but there's no time to dwell on it. The trio continues their journey through the hellish maze, moving from room to room. Suddenly, the cube starts shaking violently, and Kazan gets separated from the others. They hear Kazan's whimpers, and Worth, ever the compassionate one, decides to go back for him. Meanwhile, Levin finds a piece of her glasses on the floor, and realizes they're back in the very first room they were in. Worth eventually finds Kazan, promises him 27 bags of candy, and they make a run for it. And then, boom, the room transforms into a bridge, and when they open the door, they're greeted by a blinding white light. Freedom is within reach. But of course, it can't be that easy. Worth, with a somber expression, declares that he's staying behind. He can't face the world outside this hell. And just then, Quentin appears out of nowhere and stabs Levin in the back. Worth, in disbelief, yells at Kazan to run through the door, but Quentin isn't done yet. He attacks Worth, stabbing him in the abdomen. Kazan, overwhelmed by the sudden violence, makes a dash for the exit with Quentin hot on his heels. But Worth, refusing to give up, grabs Quentin's leg. As the cube shifts and the rooms rearrange, Quentin is brutally crushed. Worth and Levin lie on the floor, mortally wounded, as Kazan escapes into the blinding light.